My destined partner, Nolan, publicly rejected me in the Moon Oath Hall in order to secure his position as leader of Silver Valley, then turned and took the hand of the woman who could bring him an alliance. He was certain that the bond of destiny and the trauma of the 7-day rejection would trap me where I stood, forcing me to bow my head and accept his clandestine protection. But I endured the excruciating pain that felt like my bones were being torn apart, stepped past him in full view of everyone, and walked toward the man who had been exiled from Silver Valley for 7 years, his older brother and the mortal enemy he feared most. "Ronville," I said, extending my hand to him, "will you be my self-chosen mate?" Just as Nolan rejected me, the silver bell on the dome of the Moon Oath Hall rang for the 7th time. Our scents collided before everyone's eyes. Cedar, cold spring water, and that hint of bitter orange I'd known for so many years. It suddenly tugged at my heart. My wolf reared up inside me, and a homing ache radiated from deep within my bones. The hall fell silent for a moment, then someone laughed. It wasn't malicious, it was more like a sigh of relief. The heir designate of this generation of Silver Valley had finally found his destined mate. Everything was in keeping with tradition and aligned with the ending everyone had long since written. I, too, had once thought that way. Nolan stood before the moon spring stone, a silver leaf insignia, the emblem of the heir designate, pinned to the collar of his deep gray tuxedo. He held out his hand to me, palm facing upward. I walked toward him. Less than a step away, the bond of destiny grew stronger. My fingertips had already brushed against the lines on his palm, but he pulled his hand away. "Leah Winter," he said, using my full name. It wasn't the usual, smiling Leah, nor was it the Holly girl he'd called me as a child when he'd climb over the greenhouse wall. It was my full name, as recorded in the registry. I saw Mara Crow, chair of the Moon Council, lower her eyes and open the register on the table. She had known all along. Nolan's gaze passed over me and settled on Selena Hart on the other side of the room. Silver Valley is about to enter its harshest winter. The salt, herbs, and northern passage provided by the Valley Alliance are vital to the safety of every member, he said calmly, as if presenting a resolution that had been thoroughly debated in the council chamber. I cannot act solely on my instincts. I didn't move. He continued, I acknowledge the bond of destiny between us, but I refuse to form a mate bond with you. The light on the moon spring stone dimmed. Something tore its way from my chest all the way up to my throat. I clenched my teeth, but a short gasp still escaped me. The scent of destiny turned bitter in an instant, a change all the werewolves in the hall could detect. Pity first appeared on the faces of those closest to me, then spread like a water stain. Nolan reached out his hand to Selena. She didn't take it right away, she simply asked, "Is this a choice you've made after careful consideration?" "Yes." "You weren't coerced?" "No." Selena placed her hand in his palm. Behind them, I heard Mara announce that Nolan's formal rejection of me had been recorded. According to Silver Valley's rules, I would enter a 7-day observation period. During this time, my access to Moon Spring would be maintained, my member housing secured, and any new mate registration would require council review. It sounded quite civilized. After 7 days, if my application for independent membership is not approved, I will lose my public housing, winter reserves, and safe passage. A werewolf who has just been rejected will not be accepted by other packs either. With my current low fever and bone pain, I can't even make it out of Grey Mist Valley on my own. Nolan knows this. The council knows this. They left me a path so narrow I could barely stand on it, then waited for me to thank them. The ceremony is suspended. Mara closed the register. "Leia, you need a healer." "I don't." My voice was hoarse, but loud enough to make the people in the front row turn around. I turned around. The doors to the Moon Oath Hall were blocked by Silver Valley guards. A few visitors from the border stood at the very back. They had originally come to attend the trade corridor hearing. The man in the center wore a worn black coat, with snow still clinging to his shoulders. He was taller than Nolan, with a faint scar beside his brow. He wore no Silver Valley insignia and did not bow in acknowledgement when Nolan was identified. Ron Vale. Nolan's half-brother, the former first in line to the throne. Banished from Silver Valley 7 years ago, he now ruled the Grey Ridge borderlands, a place everyone considered desolate yet couldn't do without. I'd seen him once when I was 16. Nolan and a few young guards cornered a low-ranking member, forcing him to demonstrate a transformation he couldn't yet control consistently. Everyone was laughing, but Ron walked over and removed Nolan's hand from the man's shoulder. He didn't strike him, nor did he roar. He said, "He's already refused. Can't you understand that, or do you simply refuse to listen?" Not long after that, Ron lost his right to the succession. I stepped over the silver line in the center of the Moonbow Hall, a symbol of the union between partners, and walked toward him. With every step, the trauma of rejection jolted through my bones. Ron looked at me, his hands hanging at his sides slowly clenching into fists. He wasn't surprised. That made me pause halfway. Nolan's voice came from behind me, "Leia." I didn't turn around. I walked up to Ron and lifted my face to meet his. "I'm in the observation exclusion period," I said. "I don't have a stable mate, no other pack is willing to take me in, and if I crossed the wilderness alone, I'd probably die on the second night. Ron's gaze fell on my trembling hand, then returned to my face. I know. You're the last person Nolan would want me to choose. That's no secret either. Will you be my self-chosen partner? It was as if someone had suddenly sucked the air out of the hall. Ron didn't answer right away. He took half a step toward me, then stopped as I instinctively tensed my shoulders. Temporary, or permanent? Temporary. To survive, or to get back at him? Both. The corner of his mouth twitched, but it wasn't a smile. Honesty is a dangerous habit, Leah. You can refuse. Ron looked up at Nolan behind me. I didn't turn around, but I knew the brothers were exchanging glances across from me. Nolan's anger mingled with the air, making the scent of cedar sharp. My body still ached at that scent, but the pain didn't make any decisions for me. Ron turned his gaze back to me. I accept. The sound of Nolan knocking his chair aside came from behind me. Before anyone could react, I grabbed Ron's hand. The palm of his hand was burning hot. I thought I was grasping a knife that could cut through this impasse. Only later did I realize that, in that moment, the one who was more afraid of being cut might not have been me. The side chamber of the Moon Oath Hall had no windows, only a moon mirror used for remote hearings. Mara sat behind the desk, tapping her knuckles rhythmically against the old codex. Tessa Reed stood beside her, clutching her notepad, never daring to look at me. We'd known each other for 11 years. She knew better than anyone how much I detested it when people pretended nothing had happened in my presence. Trauma can cloud judgment, Mara said. Postponing this for 7 days is in your best interest. A formal rejection won't disappear just because we wait 7 days. What you're feeling right now is physical pain. So you're going to decide for me which kind of pain is right? Mara furrowed her brow slightly. Don't take the protocol as being directed against you. Then please follow the protocol. I wrote my 3 demands on a piece of paper and slid it to the center of the table. Do not establish a full imprint. Do not restrict my ability to leave during the sanctuary period. Do not speak on my behalf at any hearing. Ron stood to my right and picked up the paper to read it over. Add one more clause, he said. I looked up. You may unilaterally terminate the provisional application. No permission from me is required. Mara's tapping stopped. You all seem to have forgotten that Grey Ridge only grants 14 days of border asylum, she said, flipping open the code. Even if Ron signs, Grey Ridge cannot directly grant you permanent membership. 14 days is enough time for me to apply for a transfer of citizenship. If Silver Valley approves it. If Silver Valley doesn't approve it, I'll request an independent hearing. Mara looked at Tessa. Tessa's fingers flinched at the edge of the record pad. The old law does indeed allow those who are rejected to immediately apply for a partner of their own choosing. The clause number is Volume 7, Article 42, Ron said. Silence fell over the side chamber once more. He hadn't even looked at the code. Mara's gaze grew colder. You're quite familiar with a rule that almost no one ever uses. The Borderlands have taken in the rejected before. They've never taken in the destined mate of a Silver Valley heir. Former destined mate, I corrected her. Mara set down her pen. I can grant 14 days of sanctuary. The application for a temporary partnership is under review. You may not establish a full bond until the Moon Mirror hearing is complete. We wouldn't have anyway, Ron said. I looked at him. What I want to hear is that you agree to my terms. He looked back at me, showing no impatience. I agree. I agree to all 4. Including not speaking on my behalf. Including that. Even if you think I'm wrong? You have the right to be wrong. Those words surprised me more than any promise of protection. I picked up the pen and signed my name at the end of the agreement. My hand was still shaking, and the last stroke tore the paper. Ron signed next to me. He wrote quickly, as if that name had long been waiting to stand alongside mine. As I stepped out of the side chamber, Nolan was standing at the end of the stone corridor. The guard stepped back, giving the heir apparent a decent amount of private space. Ron asked me, do you want me to stay? No. He glanced at Nolan. I'll wait outside. Only after the footsteps faded did Nolan walk toward me. You've been through a lot today, he said in a very low voice, as if we were still close enough to share secrets. I don't blame you for taking your frustration out on me through Ron. And I don't need your forgiveness. He reached out to touch my arm. I took a step back. The scent of cedar washed over me, and my chest immediately clenched in pain. Nolan smelled it and saw my hand pressed against my sternum. His expression softened slightly, even taking on a familiar tenderness. See, he said, your body knows who you belong to. My stomach churned. It only knows that you've hurt me. Leia, I must take responsibility for Silver Valley. The alliance Selena has brought will ensure that over 200 members can safely get through the winter. Once the succession is confirmed, many things can be rearranged. What things? You can stay in your original residence. You'll have no shortage of moon spring and provisions. I'll have the guards look after you. No one will dare treat you with disrespect. In what capacity? Nolan paused. It's not necessary for everyone to know your status. The wind from outside the stone corridor seeped through the door crack, turning my low-grade fever into a layer of cold sweat. So he wasn't going to lose me after all. He just wanted me to disappear from the main entrance of the Moon Oath Hall, then return to him through a door no one would see. Does Selena know? This has nothing to do with her. She'll become a suitable partner for Silver Valley, and you are. Don't say it. He frowned. Don't wrap an insult in the guise of comfort and hand it back to me. I pulled the provisional agreement from my coat pocket and unfolded it for him to see. I've already made my choice. Ron is using a traumatized woman to challenge the order of succession. Do you really think the council will accept that? At least he included an exit clause in the agreement. That's because he knows you can't leave. I'll show you I can leave. Nolan's tone was still slow, as intimate as it used to be. Your application for independence won't be approved that quickly. Don't force me to watch you lose everything. You know it won't be approved before I've even submitted the application. He didn't answer. My fingernails dug into the edge of the agreement. A physical reaction isn't consent, Nolan. Pain isn't love either. The moment you rejected me, it was over between us. I walked past him. He didn't follow, but called after me, in 14 days, you'll have to come back anyway. An old carriage with a gray ridge stood parked outside the Moon Oath Hall. Ron stood by the carriage and didn't ask what we discussed. He took the luggage from my hands, placed it in the trunk, and handed me the reins. Which horse are you riding? He clearly knew I didn't want to be lifted into the carriage. I chose the quietest gray horse. For the first 2 hours, I sat very straight. By the third hour, the mountain road began to freeze over, the refusal to be traumatized spread from my chest to my spine, and the wolf's bones jostled uncontrollably beneath my skin. Gideon Shaw glanced back from the front of the line. She won't make it to Grey Ridge. I can hear you, I said. All the better. Saves me from repeating myself. Ron raised his hand, and the group stopped immediately. I can walk, I said, gripping the reins tightly. I didn't say you couldn't. Then why did we stop? He walked to a spot 2 paces away from me. You have 2 options. Get in the carriage, or share some of the moon energy with me. The carriage is slow, but it doesn't require contact. Sharing will be faster, at the cost of potential emotional feedback occurring earlier than expected. Gideon stared at him, as if he'd never heard Ron say so many words at once. I asked, how long will the contact last? About 10 minutes. Where? The hand. Just a handshake? It's up to you. My knees buckled as I swung myself off the horse. Ron took a half step forward, then stopped abruptly, waiting until I steadied myself against the saddle. I held out my hand to him. 10 minutes. His hand closed around mine very slowly. Warmth seeped in through the lines of his palm, at first so hot I wanted to pull my hand away, then it soaked into my aching bones like warm water. The wolf inside me let out a low pant, and finally stopped thrashing against my flesh. Immediately afterward, an emotion that wasn't my own surged through the point of contact. It wasn't triumph, nor was it the satisfaction of a dominant leader who had subdued its prey. It was pain, heavier and quieter than my own pain. I jerked my head up. Ron's expression remained unchanged, but his fingers were trembling. You feel it too? A little. You didn't say so just now. It doesn't affect your choice. It does. Well, now you know. He relaxed his grip, allowing me to pull away at any moment. Do you want to stop? I didn't stop. 10 minutes later, he let go right on time. The moment our palms parted, that silent ache faded away as well. I watched his lowered hand and suddenly realized that Ron's acceptance of this temporary arrangement wasn't just about getting a name that would sting Nolan. He would pay a price, too. The Frost Lake cabin was smaller than I'd imagined. The first floor had a kitchen, a living room, and Ron's desk piled high with maps of the border. The second floor had only 1 bedroom. The cabin is heated by moonstones, and the temperature is most stable on the second floor. Ron set my luggage down at the top of the stairs. The bedroom is yours. I'll sleep downstairs. Where do you usually sleep? Upstairs. Then I'll sleep downstairs. Denying trauma can make it worse at night. Is that a suggestion or an order? Ron was silent for a moment. A suggestion. That's a valid point. I accept. He placed a brass key on the table. The bedroom door can be locked from the inside. There's an escape ladder outside the window that leads to the ground. The outer door to the living room isn't locked at night. The head of the border territory doesn't lock his door when he sleeps. I used to. You don't lock it because I'm here? Because the agreement states that you're not restricted from leaving. There was also a stack of papers on the table. I picked it up. The first page outlined the steps for terminating the temporary contract, followed by a list of 3 routes to the neutral zone, along with their distances and winter risks. It was all too thoroughly prepared. I looked up at him. Are you this thoughtful toward all your protégés? No. So should I be touched? You're free to be skeptical. His composure left my sarcasm hanging. I carried my luggage upstairs. The bedroom had no extra decorations, the sheets had been freshly changed, and a dim moonstone lamp sat by the window. Half the closet was empty, but the hangers inside were set a bit lower, exactly at the height where my hand felt most comfortable. I ran my fingertips along the crossbar. The edges of the screws looked brand new. Ron couldn't have come back to adjust them after we left Silver Valley. As I came downstairs, he was replacing a piece of pine in the fireplace. Why are you replacing it? You don't like the smoke from pine. Who told you that? He paused for less than a second. The border guard investigates all those under our protection. Does the investigation note what kind of wood smoke I'm sensitive to? The medical records do. I leaned against the stair railing. My medical records only mention respiratory reactions I had as a child, they don't say I still dislike it now. Ron set the pine wood outside the door and replaced it with birch. Then I must have misremembered the source. He wouldn't make things up. But he would refuse to answer. I made a mental note of that. House rules, I said. First, no going upstairs without permission. Second, ask before using the shared moon energy. Third, do not intercept any Silver Valley news related to me. Fourth, the shelf on the left side of the kitchen is yours. What? You don't like others meddling when you're organizing your things. Giving you a space that's entirely your own will lead to fewer arguments. I stared at him. Is this part of the investigation, too? Ron put the fire tongs back in their place, we can add that to the rules. That night, I locked my bedroom door from the inside and wedged a chair against it. Then I checked the windows, the fire escape, and my keys. Everything was exactly as he'd said. I should feel at ease. But the row of hangers in my closet, lowered just for me, looked like a line of silent words. Someone knew I was coming before I even made my choice. The next day, more than 40 pairs of eyes were waiting for me in the Grey Ridge communal dining hall. It wasn't like Silver Valley here. No one fell silent automatically when Ron walked in, nor did anyone bow their heads to him. Guards and settlers sat around the long table eating breakfast, discussing the footprints that had appeared on the north slope the night before. Gideon pushed an empty bowl toward me. Leaving in 14 days? If the transfer fails. You'll stay if the transfer is successful. That's up to me. He snorted. That sounds convenient. If the Silver Valley heir doesn't want you, you'll just pick his older brother. Once the two brothers have fought it out for you, you'll choose the winner. A few people paused with their spoons midair. Ron stood half a step behind me, his scent growing heavy. I didn't look at him. I'm only applying for a 14-day asylum, I said. I'm not asking Ron to fight for Silver Valley on my behalf, nor will I interfere in Grey Ridge's affairs as his partner. If you're worried I'll pose a political risk, just say so, there's no need to pretend you care about my feelings. Gideon gave a short laugh. At least you know how to speak. And I know how to listen. Then listen carefully. The people of Grey Ridge are risking their lives to defend this road, not to wrap up Silver Valley's romantic farce. I hear you. I pushed the empty bowl back toward him. And please listen carefully. I didn't call a public rejection a romantic farce, you did. Someone on the other side of the long table couldn't hold back a laugh. Gideon glared at them, and the person immediately lowered their head to sip their soup. An older woman asked, if it's just for shelter, what gives you the right to live under the same roof as partners? Our signatures, I said. A relationship on paper has no scent. I knew what she was questioning. If Grey Ridge provided shelter based on a false partnership agreement, Silver Valley could use that to deny the borderland's right to self-governance. Ron still hadn't spoken up for me. I reached out and took his hand. This time, no pain forced me to do so. Moonlight flowed slowly from his palm, and our scents intertwined in the communal dining hall. My wolf instantly recognized the quiet heat from last night and drew close to his power. Ron's breathing faltered for a moment. Just for a moment. Yet from that fleeting emotional response, I felt a surge of desire that bordered on panic. He quickly let go, as if afraid that holding on for even one more second would hurt me. The people in the dining hall no longer doubted the authenticity of the contract. I sat down and ladled a bowl of soup. Gideon glanced at Ron, then at me. He's not usually this well-behaved. I heard that, Ron said. All the better. I repeated Gideon's earlier words back to him exactly as he'd said them, so I don't have to repeat myself. This time, even more people laughed out loud. Ron sat down beside me, making sure the back of his hand never touched mine. But I could smell the desire he was forcing himself to suppress. That made me wonder for the first time if perhaps he, too, was the one being forced to keep his distance from me. On the third night, the trauma of rejection fully took hold. First, I felt a chill, then my bones began to shift out of place. My fingernails tore through the sheets as wolf claws repeatedly extended and retracted beneath my knuckles. I bit down on the corner of the pillow, refusing to make a sound. Footsteps sounded outside the door. They stopped just at the doorway. Leia. I didn't answer. A chair was wedged against the door. If Ron wanted to, he could kick it open with a single kick. An alpha werewolf's strength was enough to tear that wooden door to shreds. He didn't. Your scent is out of control, he said. Can I come in? I curled up on the carpet, a wolf's growl squeezing from my throat. No answer means no, he said. I'll wait outside. His footsteps didn't recede. When the next wave of bone pain hit, my vision turned blood red. My half-shifted arm slammed into the edge of the bed, tearing my skin open. If this kept up, I'd complete my transformation right here in this cramped room and snap my own spine. I reached out to pull the chair closer. The wooden legs scraped against the floor with a grating sound. I unlocked the door. Ron was still standing in the same spot, his hands hanging at his sides, leaving him fully exposed to my view. "Come in," I gasped. "You can only touch my arms and hands. Don't touch the side of my neck." "Okay." He knelt before me, pressing his palms against my forearms. As the moonlight surged in, I heard him let out a low, muffled groan. The trauma's resistance split into two streams, one remained within my body, while the other was pulled into his bones through the bond. "You could give a little less," I said, grabbing his cuff. "Any less, and you'll lose control. I don't want to owe you. We'll settle that tomorrow." My wolf slowly settled into his scent. When my consciousness was at its foggiest, I grabbed his shoulders and pressed my forehead against his chest. Ron's whole body went rigid. He didn't hold me. Not until I said, "It's okay." Only then did a hand rest on my back, avoiding any spot that might be interpreted as a mark. At daybreak, I lay in bed while Ron sat on the floor, asleep with his back against the edge of the bed. His right hand was still resting by the bedside, not touching me, palm facing up. A cup of herbal tea sat on the table, brewed to the exact strength used to counteract the most severe trauma. I'd only ever drunk it once before. That was back when my mother was still alive. I picked up the cup. There was no honey. Downstairs in the kitchen, unscented soap sat by the sink, and birchwood burned quietly. Ron placed everything within my reach. After he woke up, I deliberately said, "The herbal tea would taste better with a little honey." I've always liked sweet things. "I'll add some next time." He didn't correct me. But I saw that when he turned away, his gaze fell on the honey jar and lingered there for a moment. I began jotting down these anomalies on the back of the contract termination procedure. Pine smoke. No soap. Herbal water. A clothes hanger. And he knew just how much pain I was in at night, as if he'd rehearsed how to save me long ago. In the very back of the storage room was an old wooden box. The first time I saw it, the lid was covered in dust, but the lock was brand new. I didn't open it. I just made a note of it, too. The first hearing in Silver Valley took place via the moon mirror. There were only 6 chairs in the Grey Ridge Council chamber. I sat in the one directly facing the mirror. Ron sat to my right, and Gideon stood by the door. On the other side of the mirror were the council seats of the Moon Oath Hall. Mara sat in the center, Tessa kept the minutes, and Nolan attended as a candidate for succession. The provisional contract was established within 1 hour of the formal rejection. Nolan began. At the time, the party in question was suffering from a high fever, olfactory dysfunction, and impaired judgment. Ron is familiar with the old laws, and he was also aware of her situation. This wasn't a rescue, it was exploitation. Mara turned to Ron. "Did you exploit Leah's trauma to induce her to make a choice?" Before Ron could speak, I said, "No. We're questioning the contract's protected party. I'm a party to the contract, too. Leah, procedure requires. Volume 7, Article 42, Addendum. Regarding the review of a partner's consent, the individual's own statement takes precedence. No partner, relative, or candidate may answer on their behalf." Tessa looked up. "I only remember my mother reading the general meaning aloud. I don't recall the exact wording. Last night I pored over the old Grey Ridge Codex until dawn before I found this line." Mara's expression didn't change, but her hand pressed down on the codex. "You may state your case." "I wasn't coerced. I asked Ron publicly in the Moon Oath Hall, and he confirmed the contract level and my intentions before accepting. I proposed the terms of the agreement, and the right to withdraw was clearly stated." Nolan leaned forward. "You were in so much pain you could barely stand. So you needed protection, not a relationship with an exiled former heir. You're making it sound like I had to choose between the two." "Ron won't admit what he wants. Do you know that entering into a full self-chosen contract with you would restore his eligibility to challenge the succession?" I looked at Ron. He didn't look away. "A temporary contract isn't enough. What about a full contract?" "Maybe. You didn't tell me. Because we haven't discussed a full contract." The answer was airtight, yet it reminded me of that row of coat hangers that had been lowered ahead of time. Mara steered the conversation back to the program. "Leah, why did you choose Ron?" I looked at every face in the mirror. "It wasn't because of love," I said. Ron, standing beside me, didn't move, but my surface feedback felt like a prick of a needle, very light, very quick. I chose him because I proposed no tagging, no restrictions on leaving, and no speaking on my behalf, and he accepted all of it. That's still my reason. "That's a deal based on self-interest," Nolan said. "Yes, adults can make choices based on their own interests, too. You're using the partnership system to get back at me. You're taking far too much interest in my decisions, Nolan." "Does Selena know?" In the mirror, Nolan's jaw tightened. Tessa lowered her head, as if hiding something. Mara announced that the provisional contract would remain in effect for 7 days, and a second hearing would determine whether I could complete my transfer to Grey Ridge. Before she deactivated the moon mirror, Tessa suddenly spoke up, the rejected also have. Recorder. Mara cut her off. Record only what has already been discussed. The moon mirror dimmed. I turned to Ron. What was she trying to say? I don't know. A tension rippled through the shallow pact. You're hiding something. I don't know which one she was referring to. Another truth. I stood up and put away my notes. Ron asked, you just said it wasn't because of love. Do you mind? No. I walked past him and caught a faint, bitter scent. After that day, Ron took me to the moon spring at Grey Ridge to practice controlling my transformation. The spring wasn't very large, and there were none of the towering stone pillars found in Silver Valley. The members of Grey Ridge had built a windbreak themselves, with the names of those who contributed their labor carved into every stone. The moon spring here didn't belong to any particular family, nor was it allocated solely by the chieftain. I stepped barefoot into the shallow water. Ron stood an arm's length away. Let the wolf out a little first. Easier said than done. You've been suppressing it the whole time. All it wants to do right now is bite someone. Bite who? Whoever's close enough. He took half a step back. I couldn't help but laugh. It was the first time I'd truly laughed out loud since leaving the Moon Oath Hall. Ron looked at me, his expression softening slightly. Breathe. Don't follow Nolan's lingering scent, find your own. What's mine? Holly leaves, earth after the rain, and what? He paused. The smell of greenhouse glass heated by the sun. That answer was too specific. I stepped closer to him. The water in Moon Spring was only ankle deep, and with every step we took, our reflections shattered beneath our feet. The closer I got, the stronger his scent became. It wasn't the cedar scent that Nolan carried, the kind that evoked a sense of belonging from days gone by, but rather fur, iron, and stones after a snowstorm. My wolf reacted to him differently. It wasn't a pull of destiny. It was me who wanted to get closer. Stop, Ron said. Are you ordering me? A reminder. I took another step closer. I need to know the limits of the shallow bond. His shoulders tensed. Desire overflowed from his scent, sharp yet restrained. I raised my hand, my fingertips just a hair's breadth from his chest. Ron stepped back first. Don't use yourself as a test subject. Are you afraid of losing control? Yes. His admission was so direct that I was left speechless. I thought leaders never admitted to being afraid. That's the kind of leader Silver Valley teaches. You aren't? I don't want to be. The wind blew across Moon Spring, and the water crashed against the rock wall. I sensed the desire he was suppressing, and beneath that desire, an even deeper worry. I asked, if I'd touched you just now, what would you have done? Back off. What if I hadn't let you? Figure out what you want. What if I don't know either? Then don't do anything. I crouched down and dipped my hands into the spring water to hide my inexplicably flushed face. Ron said, I've waited long enough, a few more days won't make a difference. I looked up. As if realizing he'd said too much, he turned to grab the towel lying on the bank. Wait for what? For you to regain your judgment. I watched his back and added another item to my mental list of oddities. I'd waited long enough. Nolan and Selena arrived at Grey Ridge on the 5th day. Ostensibly, it was to renegotiate the winter trade agreement, but in reality, Nolan hadn't taken his eyes off me since he dismounted. In the border negotiation room, Ron sat at one end of the long table, and Nolan sat at the other. I didn't have a seat reserved for a companion, nor did I need one. I pulled out a chair myself and sat on Ron's side, keeping enough distance between us to clearly see the documents. Nolan looked at that distance and smiled. Leia used to dislike sitting by the window, he said. When she was 17, a bird smashed the greenhouse glass, and she didn't dare go near that window for a month. My hand tightened around the page. Ron's scent grew faint. He didn't look at Nolan, he just pushed the window open a little, moving the potentially shattered glass away from me. That gesture unsettled me more than any rebuttal would have. He knew it, too. Selena flipped through the agreement. The North Passage can be opened, but Silver Valley must take responsibility for supplying the 2 outposts. Nolan ignored her. Do you remember that bird, Leia? I do. Later, I helped you replace the glass. It was the 3 greenhouse maintenance workers who replaced it. You were standing there. Gideon coughed, as if he'd choked on his tea. The smile on Nolan's face faded. We don't need to talk about the past as if it never existed. The past exists. The end exists, too. Are you sitting on Ron's side now because you know him, or just to keep your distance from me? These are border agreement talks, Selena said, setting down her pen. If you're going to discuss unresolved personal matters, I can step out for a moment. Nolan turned to her, his tone softening again. No need. I was just checking to see if any Silver Valley members had been affected. She's already answered that. For the first time, Selena looked me straight in the eye. There was no triumphant smugness, only scrutiny. After the meeting, she called me over outside the door. When did you submit your application for independence? On the day of the rejection ceremony. She looked at Nolan, who was talking to a guard. He told me yesterday that you hadn't applied yet. He's well aware of the status of my application. Selena's lips pressed into a straight line. When Nolan walked over, she didn't ask any further questions, she simply said, "At our next meeting, please leave the issue of your partner at the door." The gentleness on his face cracked for a moment. That night, I confronted Ron on the cabin's deck. "Nolan's been provoking you. Why haven't you said a word? You made yourself clear enough. Aren't you angry?" "I'm angry. I can tell." "Then why ask?" "I want to know if you'll do what he does, call possessiveness, protection." Ron leaned against the railing, his knuckles turning white from the pressure. "I wanted to shut him up. I wanted to drive him out of Grey Ridge. I wanted to make sure he could never call your name in that tone again. But you didn't. This is a border negotiation. He has Silver Valley's authorization. More importantly, that's your past. You don't need me to decide how to respond on your behalf." A thin layer of ice covered the lake, and moonlight spread across the cracks. I placed the prepared provisional covenant terms on the railing. "Before the second hearing, I want to finalize a deeper level of provisional covenant." Ron didn't touch the paper. "The emotional feedback will intensify. If you're hurt, I might feel an instinct to attack. When you're in pain, I'll be in pain too. When we dissolve the bond, both of us will suffer the backlash." "I've read about it." "Reading about it isn't the same as experiencing it." "So you disagree?" "I need to know why you agree." "The trauma I've rejected hasn't fully stabilized yet. A temporary contract can help me. A deeper relationship will also make it easier for Grey Ridge to approve my transfer." "Anything else?" I looked out at the lake, avoiding his gaze. "I want to know, beyond mutual interest, how far our relationship could go." A wave of heat washed over me through the shallow feedback. Ron finally picked up the piece of paper. "Add one more clause," I said. "If you lose control due to the contract, you must step back even if I ask you to stay at that moment." "Okay. If the contract is dissolved, I can still apply to stay at Grey Ridge." "Of course. Why didn't you ask me anything?" "Ask what?" "How would you challenge Nolan without me?" Ron was silent for a long time. "Leia, if the covenant is dissolved, would you still be willing to stay in Grey Ridge?" He didn't answer my question. But in that moment, I realized that what I really wanted to know wasn't whether he would challenge Nolan. It was whether he wanted me to stay. The temporary self-chosen vow was held at the Moon Spring in Grey Ridge. There were no silver bells, nor a hall full of people waiting to pass judgment. Gideon and 3 settler members stood outside the spring as witnesses. Moonlight streamed through the cracks in the rocks and over the tops of our feet. Ron and I stood face to face. The first clause of the vow confirmed our identities. The second clause confirmed that the covenant could be dissolved. The third clause required both parties to state the practical pressures they were currently facing. I said, "I need Grey Ridge's protection and eligibility for transfer, and I need this covenant to provide a stable refuge from trauma." Ron said, "I need Silver Valley to recognize Grey Ridge's right to independently accept members. Your choice will weaken Nolan's control over the border." He didn't hide his motives. The light from Moon Spring crept up our clasped wrists. The final step was supposed to be the protector leaving their scent near the other's neck, not a full bite mark, but enough to establish a clear emotional bond. Ron lowered his head, then paused. "Leia, look at me." I looked up. "Are you awake?" "Awake." "Has anyone threatened you with your home, Moon Spring, or your safety? Does Silver Valley count?" He didn't smile. "Has anyone demanded that you choose me?" "No. You can stop now. The 14-day sanctuary is still in effect." I heard Gideon shift his feet in the distance, probably unable to stand Ron's repeated confirmations. But I didn't think it was unnecessary. "I need sanctuary," I said, "and I really do want to know where this will take us." "Both are true." "The full mark?" "Not allowed." "Okay." I took the initiative to close the last bit of distance between us, resting my forehead against his shoulder. The bond closed. The emotions Ron had suppressed for so many years burst forth as if a door had suddenly been thrown open. Longing, worry, pain, and a sense of familiarity that had existed even before I had grabbed him all crashed into my chest at once. I nearly lost my balance. He immediately gripped my waist, his hand resting on the fabric of my shirt, not moving any higher. "This isn't normal," I gasped. "What isn't?" "It's too intense." "It always is the first time." He was lying. Not because I could smell a lie, smell can never prove complex truths. It was because Ron avoids eye contact when he lies, and he was staring at the Moon Spring stone behind me. I gripped his jaw, forcing him to look at me again. "How long have you been waiting, exactly?" His Adam's apple bobbed. "Until you asked me yourself." "I'm asking now. Today, I'll only ask questions I'm sure you want to hear the answers to." I let go of his hand. "Then I won't ask for now." It wasn't because I didn't want to know. It was because, for the first time, I felt that some answers would change all the sense of security I currently had. Life after the vows were exchanged suddenly felt so small. Ron went on patrol early in the morning, and I helped repair the frost-damaged moon moss in the Grey Ridge public greenhouse. When he returned in the evening, there was always snow on the soles of his shoes. Sometimes I'd hear the door open upstairs and realize I'd been waiting for a long time. I still wouldn't let him come upstairs. But one night, as thunder rolled over Frost Lake, I came downstairs clutching a blanket and found him sitting at his desk, sorting through maps. "You're afraid of thunder," he said. "Until I was 10. You're not afraid now." Another clap of thunder rang out, and the wolf inside me flinched. Ron moved the map aside on the table to make room for me on the other side. He didn't invite me closer, nor did he call me out on it. I sat down across from him. After a moment, I reached my foot under the table and brushed against his calf. He looked up. "Accident," I said. I didn't pull my foot back. "Leah." "What? What are you trying to do?" "I don't know." "Then wait until you do." He shifted his legs back. I suddenly got annoyed. "You always back away. Because you're always testing me." "What if I'm not?" Ron fell silent. I stood up, walked around the corner of the desk, and stood in front of him. The shallow bond left his desire impossible to hide and exposed my own tension just as completely. "This isn't a test," I said. "It's not about rejecting trauma. No. It's not to let Nolan know. No. It's not to stabilize the bond. Ron, ask one more question, and I'm going back upstairs." He stood up, still without touching me. I kissed him first. At first, it was just a touch of lips. The next second, his hands clasped my waist, then immediately relaxed when my body stiffened. "It's okay," I whispered against his lips. Only then did he pull me closer. Ron kissed the way he patrolled the border, focused, restrained, all his ferocity stopping exactly where I allowed it. My wolf rolled over in his scent, exposing its unguarded belly. His kiss landed behind my ear, pausing as it neared the side of my neck. There was nothing blocking him there. Yet he stopped abruptly. "No marking," he said. "I know. Say it. I won't allow a full imprint." He pressed his forehead against mine. "Okay." That night, he still slept downstairs. I woke up in the middle of the night and stood on the stairs watching for a long time. He was curled up on that too-short bench, one arm shielding his eyes. The next day, I moved the chair I'd been using to barricade the bedroom door. The lock was still there. It's just that I no longer locked it every night. The border attack happened early on the 9th day. A pack of wild wolves burst through the gap in the north slope. As soon as the first alarm sounded, Ron had already thrown on his coat. "You stay in the cabin," he said. "Is that a suggestion or an order?" "An order." I looked at him. He closed his eyes for a moment. "I take that back. There will be uncontrolled shifts on the north slope, and you're still recovering. I suggest you go to the communal shelter. I can handle the evacuation." "Leah, there are 6 elderly members and 3 newly adults in the greenhouse. They're the most sensitive to the alarm. I know what it's like to deny trauma and scent disturbances. I can help stabilize them. Do you need guards, or do you need to argue with me?" Ron paused as he fastened his wrist guards. "Go to the shelter," he said. "Don't go to North Slope. Gideon will give you a safe route." "That's sound advice. I'll take it." He leaned down and brushed my forehead with his finger, quickly, as if without thinking. By the time I reached the safe house, a young member had already begun to partially shift. His wolf's claws were lodged in his palms, and the fear of those around him was constantly provoking him. I had the others step back and placed unscented soap and cold water in front of him. "Look at the water. Focus only on your own scent. I can't control it. I couldn't control it 3 days ago either. You have Ron. I have myself first. Breathe." The alarm sounded again. The sound of cracking wooden beams came from outside. Several guards escorted the last group of residents into the house. Gideon's shoulders were covered in blood. "Where's Ron?" I asked. "North Slope." Just then, the bond tightened violently. A wave of excruciating pain exploded from my ribs, but it wasn't mine. Ron was hurt. I handed the shelter over to the elders, who had already stabilized the situation, and grabbed the first aid kit by the wall. Gideon blocked the door. "You promised not to go to the North Slope. Circumstances have changed. If you go, you'll only distract him. If he collapses from blood loss, who's going to guard the breach?" Gideon stared at me for 2 seconds, then tossed me a dagger. "Stay close to me." The snow on the north slope had been trampled a dark red. Ron was leaning against the broken wall, 3 deep claw marks across his ribs. 2 wild wolves lay dead in front of him, a third was circling around the rocky slope toward his back. I didn't rush forward to prove myself. I grabbed the signal flare that had fallen to the ground and aimed it at the gap, setting off the Grey Ridge assembly flare. The wolf turned its head, startled by the loud bang. Gideon pounced from the side, and Ron seized the opportunity to clamp his hands around its throat. "Let's get out of here." I ran over to Ron and pressed the first aid strap against his wound. "You shouldn't have come. Save that for when you're not bleeding." He tried to stand on his own, but his knee buckled. I slipped under his arm. "Put your weight on me. Little Holly." My footsteps halted. That was the nickname my mother used to call me. After she passed away, no one called me that anymore. Ron was already semi-conscious from blood loss and didn't realize what he'd said. Gideon and I dragged him to the shelter. The attack ended in the afternoon. The breach was held, 3 guards were injured, but no members were killed. For the first time, the people of Grey Ridge didn't see me as trouble brought by Silver Valley. Someone took my first aid kit, and someone else pressed a cup of hot water into my hands. The young member I'd comforted wiped the blood from my face. But I could only stare at the unconscious Ron. I refused the herbal tea for trauma. Thunder. My mother's nickname. He was learning more and more, it could no longer be explained away as a boundary investigation. When Ron woke up, I was changing his bandages in the cabin. The wound will leave a scar, I said. You've been through this before. It's nothing to be proud of. I'm not proud of it. He was injured below his ribs, so it was difficult for him to raise his arm. I went to the storage room to look for spare gauze. That old wooden box was tucked away at the back of the shelf. The lock wasn't secured properly. I hadn't intended to peek inside. But as I pulled out the gauze, the lid swung open, and a wooden moon wolf rolled to my feet. I bent down to pick it up. A corner of the wolf's tail was missing, and the back was engraved with crooked letters. It was something I'd made with my own hands when I was 16, and it went missing after a moon spring gathering. I searched for an entire month, thinking it had fallen into the spring's well. There were also a few unmailed letters inside the box. The one on top was labeled only with my name and the year. 7 years ago. 6 years ago. 4 years ago. I didn't open them. I carried the wooden box into the living room and set it down in front of Ron. His face was already pale from blood loss, and when he saw the moon wolf, his breath caught in his throat. Explain. You shouldn't have come across it while looking for gauze. So it's my fault for finding it too soon? No. Why do you have this? Someone gave it to me to keep. Who? I promised not to say. You prepared a room for me, know my habits, have studied rejection trauma, and even know my mother's nickname. Now you're telling me you've kept something I threw away when I was 16 and a letter written to me 7 years ago. Ron sat up straight, and blood immediately seeped from his wound. Don't move. I instinctively reached out, then stopped just before touching him. You've known me for a long time. Yes. How long? Since before you turned 16. Why did you get close to me? I didn't get close to you. So you were watching me? Not exactly. He closed his eyes briefly. I promised someone I wouldn't interfere with your destined relationship until you asked about it yourself. I'm asking now. The message she left belongs to her, too. I'm not the only one who can decide whether or not to tell you. Her. Ron fell silent. Just then, the door swung open, and Gideon walked in carrying the hearing documents. He saw the wooden box on the table and stopped in his tracks. You know, too, I said. I know part of it. Who is that woman? Gideon looked at Ron. Don't look at him, answer me. That's none of my business. But it seems everyone knows more about my business than I do. I put the moonwolf charm back on the table and picked up the bandage I hadn't finished changing. Let's tend to the wound today. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Ron said, some of the files must be released by the Silver Valley Registry. Then tell me what I'm not allowed to say, instead of continuing to decide for me how much I should know. He didn't agree. For the first time, the silence in the contract made me feel suffocated. The next day, a Silver Valley messenger delivered a wax-sealed envelope. The cover read, supplementary evidence for the second hearing. Inside was the priority asylum application Ron had signed 2 years ago. My name was clearly written in the applicant field. There was also a record of Grey Ridge's purchase of trauma relief herbs. The proportions, dosage, and storage method were all identical to what I've been using these past few days. At the very bottom was a handwritten note by Nolan. Ron had included Leah Winter in his plan long before the fated rejection occurred. He used private information to induce her to enter into a self-chosen covenant, with the aim of restoring his eligibility to inherit Silver Valley. My hands were cold. Are these documents real? I asked. Ron stood on the other side of the council chamber. Yes. You applied to protect me 2 years ago? Yes. Nolan wasn't the sole heir candidate back then. No. You're still eligible to request a review of the succession. Technically, yes. Did you study rejection trauma because you knew Nolan would reject me? I knew it was a possibility. Who told you that? Someone in Silver Valley filed an appeal against the rejection procedure. Who? I can't say until the files are released. Not again. I flipped through the records page by page. He hadn't told a single lie. All his answers were accurate and concise, leaving the most important details locked behind closed doors. Was the room also prepared 2 years ago? Partly. What about my daily habits? From records, and from observation. How long have you been observing me? For many years. Did you accept me because the full companion contract would allow you to return to Silver Valley? No. Do you want me to believe you? I want you to wait for the file. You're making me wait again. It wasn't until the words left my mouth that I realized I was trembling. In the Moon Oath Hall, Nolan decided for me that stability was more important than I was. In the cabin by Frost Lake, Ron decided for me that secrecy was more important than my right to know. One person took away my choices and hid me away. Another prepared an escape route with meticulous care, yet refused to even tell me why it existed. I thought being overly considerate was just a habit of yours, I said. It turns out that from the moment I set foot in Grey Ridge, I'd been living in the spot you'd arranged for me 2 years ago. Leah, it's not a spot. Then what is it? Ron opened his mouth. No answer. I placed the provisional contract on the table. I'm moving out of the Frost Lake cabin. His shoulders tensed. Where to? There's a side room off the council hall at Grey Ridge for members of the Independent Sanctuary. The moon energy is unstable there. I've already passed the peak of my trauma. I can leave the cabin. There's no need. It's your home. Leah. Article 4 of the agreement. I can unilaterally withdraw from our cohabitation without your permission. He stared at that piece of paper for a long time. Fine. Just one word. He didn't stop me, didn't order the guards to keep an eye on me, and didn't use the contract to force me to stay. I should have felt relieved because of that. But as I turned to leave the council chamber, the pain radiating from the other end of the contract nearly made it impossible for me to take a step. Ron stood where he was and didn't chase after me. This time, he strictly observed the boundaries I'd set. Yet for the first time, I wished he'd break the rules. The bed in the side room of the council chamber was narrow, and the moonstone dimmed every half hour. I barely slept that first night. A temporary contract doesn't understand what a breakup is, nor does it know who's in the right. It only knows that we're too far apart, so it tightens around my sternum, beat by beat. It hurt me, and it hurt Ron, too. He didn't come all night. When I opened the door at dawn, there was a paper bag filled with stabilizing herbs sitting outside. There was no note, nor any sign that anyone had stopped by. I brought the paper bag inside, stood there for a long time, then put it back exactly as it was. When I opened the door again at noon, the paper bag was still there. Gideon was leaning against the far end of the hallway, inspecting his dagger. Did he send you? No. Then what are you doing standing here? Watching to see which one of you two will wear yourselves out first. I closed the door. He pressed the hilt of his dagger against the door. The hearing's been moved up. Silver Valley wants you back at the Moon Oath Hall tomorrow. There are still 4 days left until the 14th day sanctuary. They say there's suspicion of coercion in your contract with Ron, and it must be reviewed before you transfer your citizenship. Who's escorting me? Me. Ron isn't coming? Gideon sheathed his knife. He thinks you don't want to see him right now. Since when has he been so good at reading my mind? He always has been. That's the problem. I pulled the door open. Gideon's expression was still stern, but there were dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. You know he filed for asylum 2 years ago, I said. I know. Why? Check the files. Is that the only thing any of you ever say? I know another one, he said, heading downstairs. Ron's an idiot. I agree with that one. He put everything he could account for in his statement to the council. He didn't make any excuses for himself. Also, the Frost Lake cabin wasn't built for you. The coat rack was modified 2 years ago, and the herbs were stocked 2 years ago. That's true. But he never intended for you to have to live there. What's the difference? Gideon stopped at the top of the stairs. The trap is meant to trap you. The escape route is the hope that you'll never need to use it. With that, he walked away. That evening, Tessa contacted me through the moon mirror in the council chamber. Only half of her face was visible in the mirror, with the registry sealing high filing cabinets behind her. I can't hand you the sealed documents directly, she said. Then why did you contact me? To tell you the legal way to access them. As a direct heir of the party involved, apply to review the records submitted by Erin Winters during her lifetime that pertain to your membership rights. Don't write, old appeal, right, refusal seeker independent status procedure. That way, Mara won't be able to classify it as a private file. What did my mother file? Whenever Tessa was nervous, she would fidget with the corners of a piece of paper. She had already creased a white line into the paper in the mirror. I can't speak for the archives. You've picked it up, too. Leah, I'm so sorry. For which incident? Knowing before the ceremony that Nolan would refuse, or watching his faction delay my application after the ceremony? She looked up. The answer was already written on her face. A chill ran through my chest. Who requested the delay? You submitted the inquiry as I told you to, she whispered. I'll fulfill my duties as the recorder. This time? Tessa closed her eyes for a moment. This time. I didn't forgive her. I simply picked up a pen and paper and wrote out the application in the format she specified. Relationships could be dealt with later. The process wouldn't wait for me to sort through every bit of heartache. The next day, before returning to Silver Valley, Selena was waiting for me at the border outpost. She hadn't brought Nolan, she'd only brought a witness from the Valley Alliance. She'd traded her evening gown for a dark coat suitable for riding, and she wasn't wearing the silver ring she'd worn as her partner's during the public ceremony. I have 10 minutes, she said. I don't need you to explain why you accepted Nolan. I don't intend to explain either. She handed me a draft of the political partnership agreement. The clauses regarding salt, herbs, and the North Passage were clearly written, but the section on the partnership listed only the parties' obligation to cooperate publicly. There was no commitment to private exclusivity. Before the ceremony, Nolan told me that his destined bond with you had ended, she said. He said you agreed not to make the relationship public so as not to affect the alliance. My finger paused on the page. I never agreed to that. I know that now. When did you find out? He mentioned the status of your application during the Grey Ridge talks. After we got back, I asked him why he cared about a relationship that had already ended. He said you were just temporarily upset, and that once the resource review began, you'd accept his protection. Did he tell you in what capacity he planned to protect me? Selena's gaze turned cold. No, I asked him later. Did he admit it? He called it a responsibility to his destined mate. I handed the agreement back to her. Will you testify at the hearing? She didn't take it right away. If I publicly question him, the Valley Alliance might withdraw, she said. My home pack would lose the Silver Valley winter escort. That was the practical cost. Not every woman could immediately take the same side just because she discovered a man was lying. I understand, I said, but I won't keep your secret, nor will I use your situation to excuse Nolan. Selena looked at me for a moment. You don't like me. I don't know you. That's better than false kindness. She put the agreement away. I haven't decided whether to testify yet, but I won't complete the partnership registration with Nolan. That's your choice. It's also one of your pieces of evidence. She stepped aside to let me into the valley. The Moon Oath Hall was just as bright as it had been 11 days ago. I stood at the entrance, and my body sensed Nolan first. The bond of destiny immediately tugged at my chest. It didn't fade because of my disgust, nor did it become more bearable just because I'd kissed Ron. The wolf's body remembers the connection, the human mind remembers the hurt. Nolan walked toward me from the other end of the stone corridor. When he saw me appear alone, his expression visibly relaxed. I knew you'd come back eventually. I'm here for the hearing. Ron didn't come with you. That's none of your business. He got the political result he wanted, then just dumped you in a guest room at Grey Ridge? I was the one who moved out. Nolan reached out and pressed his hand against the side room door. He didn't touch me, but his body blocked my path. I can withdraw the rejection record. You can't. Once a formal rejection is on record, the only way to resolve it is for both parties to establish a new, voluntary relationship. So we'll start over. Selena's agreement won't be finalized. You'll return to your original housing, and I'll restore your eligibility for Moon Spring. Once the succession is confirmed, I can make it public. You still think those resources are your gift? I'm a candidate for Chief of Silver Valley. A candidate, not yet the leader. The housing and Moon Spring belong to the pack, not to you. His speech slowed. Ron can't give you stability. He wants to use you to return to Silver Valley, and when he fails, you'll belong to neither side. That's a consequence I'm willing to accept. Why do you have to go against me? Because you still think I left to punish you. I grabbed his wrist and pulled his hand away from the door. Move aside. Nolan's commanding presence descended upon the room. The moon lamps on the stone corridor walls flickered in unison. My knees instinctively buckled, and the scent of destiny tightened around my throat like a noose. He drew closer to me, his voice so gentle it was almost like the past. Leia, don't make any more mistakes. I braced myself against the doorframe and didn't back down. This is the part I'm going to put in the hearing transcript, I said. The succession candidate used her aura to prevent a member from entering a legitimate hearing. His power abruptly withdrew. In the distance, two guards responsible for ushering people in had already turned to look. Nolan took half a step back and resumed his dignified expression. You'll regret this. Put that in the record, too. I pushed open the door and entered the registration office. Tessa had already placed the search results on the desk. The first document dated back 14 years and was submitted by Aaron Winter. At the time, my mother was a registration assistant. She had handled the case of a young member who had been rejected by their predestined mate. That member was unwilling to choose a new mate immediately, but their application for independent status was delayed by the council. Eventually, after losing their housing, they left Silver Valley alone and died outside the Winter Passage. My mother cited the old law, demanding the restoration of independent observer status for the rejected. After the trauma period ends, the individual may apply for a change of affiliation without being tied to any mate. The original pack may not use Moon Spring, housing, or the safety corridor to force them to resume or establish a new relationship. Mara shelved the proposal on the grounds that it could easily undermine the stability of the pack. Attached at the end of the document was a private safety trust agreement. If my destined mate comes from a hereditary family and I am subjected to coercion regarding resources or relationships, my mother authorizes boundary territory to provide me with priority sanctuary and requires the trustee not to interfere with my relationship choices for the purpose of protection. Trustee signature, Ron Vale. Dated 3 months before his exile. My vision blurred for a moment. The Moonwolf charm, I said. Tessa flipped to the list of attachments. Erin included it as a token of trust. She said it was your personal property, and it's up to you to decide whether to retrieve it or discard it in the future. What about the letter Ron wrote? It's not in the file. That was his. Not a plan, not an investigation report, just a letter that had gone unsent for 7 years. I continued reading downward. The second document was an internal recommendation sent by the Nolan camp to the registry on the afternoon of the rejection ceremony, requesting that my application for independence be postponed until the end of the observation period, on the grounds that residual karmic resonance with the heir apparent might influence my statements. It was sent 2 hours before I submitted my application. He had long since decided that, regardless of whether I applied or not, he would make me wait until both my resources and my body forced me to turn back. Does this recommendation have legal effect? I asked. No, Tessa said, but Mara acted on the recommendation. Did you record it? I did. The original timestamp is preserved as well. Where's the anti-coercion clause? She pulled out the last page. Succession candidates may not use membership, public resources, access to the moon spring, or the protection of the guardians to coerce any adult into establishing, resuming, or concealing a partnership. Violators forfeit their eligibility for succession review. I read it twice. Why didn't anyone tell me this before? This rule is in the succession review volume, not the partner registration volume, Tessa said softly. Ordinary members hardly ever look there. My mother looked it up. She's looked it up for a lot of people. There was another gray document envelope on the table, not in the Silver Valley archival format. What's this? Gideon delivered it yesterday. A document of renunciation of inheritance rights, witnessed by the Grey Ridge Council. Ron signed it 8 months ago, requesting that it be publicly processed in Silver Valley. Mara never got around to arranging it. I didn't open it right away. 8 months ago. That was before Nolan rejected me, before the sanctuary, and even before this round of Valley Alliance negotiations. If Ron had already renounced his inheritance rights, the full self-selection covenant couldn't possibly restore his eligibility. The explanation Nolan gave me cracked right down the middle. But the pain didn't go away because of it. Ron's reason for protecting me might have been love, but a cover-up is still a cover-up. He turned my mother's promise into a wall and shut me out from the other side. I finally understood that gentle intentions don't automatically turn mistakes into right decisions. I want these documents entered into the hearing record, I said. Tessa nodded. I need your signature to confirm the search path. She handed me the pen, her hand still trembling. I signed my name, ignoring the apology she hadn't yet voiced. Do your duty first, I said. Okay. We'll talk about us later. Tessa's eyes reddened, but she still only replied, okay. The formal hearing began in the evening. The Moon Oath Hall was filled with adult members. Mara had originally allowed only the council and the candidates faction to attend, but I invoked the rule regarding public records of rejection, insisting that anyone who had witnessed the rejection also had the right to witness the subsequent review. I sat at the witness stand. To my left were Nolan and 3 elders supporting him. The seat to my right had been empty. Only after Mara announced the start of the review did Ron walk in from the back of the hall. He didn't sit next to me, but stopped at the independent witness stand. His wound made his steps slower than usual, and he looked very pale. The covenant tightened sharply when he appeared. I didn't give him a second glance. Mara spoke first. During a period of severe rejection trauma, Leah Winter entered into a temporary self-chosen covenant with Ron Weil, who has a conflict of interest regarding the Silver Valley inheritance. The council has reason to suspect that this relationship lacked full voluntariness. I request priority to make my own statement, I said. You can do that later. Voluntary partner review. My statement takes priority. The terms were confirmed at the first hearing. The sound of pages turning filled the chamber. Mara looked at me. Please proceed. I was under practical pressure when I chose Ron. The 7-day observation period, housing, moon spring, and the safe passage all influenced my decision, I said. But the pressure wasn't created by Ron. I proposed the terms of my agreement. He accepted the right of withdrawal, and he didn't establish a full imprint when I refused. Nolan stood up. Accepting the terms doesn't mean there was no premeditation. He listed you as a protected individual 2 years ago. I know. He studied your habits, prepared drugs, and arranged a place for you to stay. He wanted you to depend on him when you were at your most vulnerable. These actions hurt me, I said. Ron's scent turned bitter in the distance. Nolan thought I was taking his side, and his tone softened. It's not too late for you to understand now. I'm not finished yet. He paused. Ron withheld information and decided for me which truths would hurt me. That goes against my requirements for a relationship. I moved out of his residence, and I haven't forgiven him. Mara immediately interjected. Since you admit the foundation of the relationship has been damaged, the provisional contract should be terminated, and you should return to Silver Valley to observe your status. Terminating the contract and returning to Silver Valley are 2 separate matters. Transferring registration to Grey Ridge depends on your partner's acceptance. It doesn't. I placed my mother's old petition on the records desk. The independent observation clause for the rejected has never been repealed, it was merely removed from the simplified manual by the council. Adults may apply for independent transfer of citizenship without establishing any partnership. The hall fell silent at first, then a low murmur arose. Mara did not touch the document. A proposal to archive it is not the same as current regulations. Please turn to the last page. The original clause remains in effect, the council has not passed a vote to repeal it. You've simply stopped informing the members. Tessa stood up. The original code and the records of amendments over the years have been cross-checked. The clause is valid. Mara turned to her. Recorder, you have no authority to interpret it. I only verify the records. Tessa's voice was still tight, but she did not sit down. Nolan stepped up to the witness stand. Even if you can transfer your allegiance independently, that doesn't prove Ron didn't take advantage of you. Once he establishes a full contract with you, he'll be able to challenge me again. He can't, Gideon said, lifting a document from the witness stand. 8 months ago, witnessed by the Grey Ridge Council, Ron signed a permanent waiver of his inheritance rights to Silver Valley. The Silver Valley Monthly Council refused to schedule a public hearing. Ron glanced at him. You said to keep this confidential for now, Ron said. I'm not under your code of silence right now, Gideon retorted sharply. This is her hearing. The document was passed to Mara. Nolan snatched it away, checking the date first, then the signature. This could be forged. 12 adult members of Grey Ridge witnessed it together, Gideon said. You can ask them one by one. He could have added the signatures afterward. The original has always been stored in the neutral boundary filing cabinet. The Silver Valley receipt record also shows the same date, Tessa said. Nolan turned to Ron. Why did you back out? Ron didn't look at him. He was looking at me. I request to make a statement. My heart skipped a beat. Mara said, you're the contract's protected party, you have the right to. I'll only state my own choice, Ron interrupted her. I won't speak for Leah. He walked to the center of the hall, without approaching my seat. I renounce my claim to the Silver Valley inheritance because I refuse to accept the use of members, partners, and public resources as a candidate's personal bargaining chip. The document took effect in Grey Ridge 8 months ago. Today, I publicly reaffirm this in Silver Valley. Nolan snorted, that sounds nice. Then why did you set your sights on Leah 2 years ago? Because Aaron Winter entrusted me with a safety pledge. Because I knew you might reject her for the sake of the Alliance's succession. And also because... He paused. Everyone was waiting. Because I love her. The words were spoken without ceremony, without invoking the bond of destiny, and without a chieftain's proclamation. Just a statement of fact. My fingers curled. I've loved her for a very long time, Ron continued. So long that I mistook protection for silence, thinking that as long as I didn't interfere with her and Nolan, I was respecting her. After she came to Grey Ridge, I still made the same mistake. I prepared every possible escape route, but I didn't tell her why. I gave her a way out, but I decided for her what she couldn't see beyond that door. His voice was always short and steady. Every pause carried great weight. This is my responsibility, not evidence of her poor judgment. Your personal feelings have no bearing on the contract review, Mara said. So I'm withdrawing from the contract. I looked up sharply. Ron had already pulled out a copy of the provisional contract's termination clause. What did you say? Article 4 of the agreement, either party may withdraw during the hearing. I know the terms. I won't let you feel forced to keep choosing me just to prove you didn't make the wrong choice. He looked at me, his eyes devoid of any plea. Leah Winter, from this moment on, I renounce all protections, rights to be heard, and relationship benefits that come with the status of provisional partner. Your application for Grey Ridge will be reviewed independently by the members' council, without me as your guarantor. You owe me nothing by staying, nor do you need to prove anything by forgiving me. Ron. I accept the release from Backlash. He signed the copy. The moonspring stone emitted a dull thud. The contract was yanked violently from his chest. I steadied myself against the edge of the table to keep from falling. Ron's body wavered, and the bandage over his wound quickly seeped with blood. He bore the heavier backlash reserved for the party initiating the termination and crashed to his knees on the stone floor. Gideon took a step forward. Ron raised his hand to stop him, then pushed himself back to his feet. No one in the hall spoke. For the first time, genuine panic flashed across Nolan's face. Because Ron had thrown away everything Nolan could understand. His right of inheritance, his right to a partner, and the final contract that kept me by his side. He's putting on a show, Nolan said. Leah, he knows you'll go back out of guilt. My chest ached as if it had been hollowed out, yet my mind was clearer than ever. The bond of destiny was still pulling me toward Nolan. The temporary contract no longer pulled me toward Ron. For the first time, I was unprotected by any supernatural bond and unbound by any relationship. All that remained was my own choice. Continue the hearing, I said. Mara frowned. You need medical leave. I refuse. Please put that on record. Tessa looked down and jotted it down. I placed the internal recommendation from Nolan's camp regarding the request for a postponement on the table. On the afternoon of the rejection ceremony, Nolan's representative requested that the registry postpone my application for independence. This was before I had formally submitted it. He also proposed in the Stone Hall that I accept his private protection while keeping my identity confidential. Before today's hearing, he again proposed restoring our relationship and used his authority as chief to prevent me from entering. Nolan's supporters began whispering among themselves. There are no witnesses, he said. There were 2 escort guards in the Stone Hall. The 2 were called to the front. They only confirmed seeing the aura cause fluctuations in the moonlight and hearing me say I wanted it recorded. No one knew what he had said privately. Nolan breathed a sigh of relief. She misunderstood my good intentions and the trauma of the rejection. I can testify. Selena walked in through the side door of the hall. The Valley Alliance witness behind her carried the unfinished political partnership agreement. Nolan looked at her. You shouldn't have come. That statement alone proves I should have come. Selena took her place at the witness stand, without looking at me. Before Nolan publicly rejected Leia, he told me their relationship had been privately ended by mutual consent. That is not true. After the Grey Ridge talks, he further admitted that he planned to allow Leia to continue relying on his housing, voting rights at Moon Spring, and guard protection, all while keeping her identity secret. I refused to finalize the political partnership agreement. You're putting your own pack at risk, Nolan said in a low voice. That's my risk, Selena said. It's no reason for you to make decisions for me. Those words rang out clearly in the Moon Oath Hall. I saw several members who had sworn allegiance to Nolan exchange glances. Mara tried to cut off the testimony. A private partnership arrangement is not the same as coercion. The anti-coercion clause includes concealing relationships, I said. Candidates may not use resources to force members to establish, resume, or conceal a partnership. The provisions require clear evidence. The delayed registration record, 2 private proposals, the use of aura, and Selena's testimony. Each item can be explained on its own, but what about all of them together? You're seeking revenge for being rejected. I'm demanding an investigation into whether someone who wants to be leader respects a member's right to say no. Nolan finally lost his patience. I gave up my destined partner for Silver Valley. He turned to face the entire hall. I chose the Valley Alliance, I chose everyone's safety this winter, and now I'm to be disqualified because of her momentary anger. You didn't give me up, I said. You wanted to publicly choose the alliance while keeping me in private. You wanted to have it both ways. I love you. The scent of destiny suddenly grew intense, and the wolf inside me let out a mournful howl. I looked at him. Perhaps you believe that, I said, but in the relationship you love, only you have the right to determine the roles. Nolan took a step forward. Your body's reaction doesn't lie. Nor does the scent reveal the truth. It can only tell you that I'm in pain, that I'm afraid, that I'm drawn to you. It cannot speak for me and say I'm willing. I turned to the members in the hall. You may continue to support Nolan, the Guardian Oath is your choice. But please make that choice after reviewing these records. If a candidate believes the duty to protect allows him to ignore refusals, hide a partner, or delay membership, then the next person assigned a position may not be me. No one cheered immediately, nor did anyone suddenly stand behind me. The first to rise was an elder member who had worked in the public storage room for 20 years. She walked to the Moon Spring stone and placed her hand upon it. I withdraw my vow of guardianship for Nolan Ver until the succession review is complete. The second person remained silent for a long time before standing up. Then came the third. Some remained seated, some bowed their heads, and some clearly disagreed with me, yet they were no longer willing to allow Nolan to continue exercising the powers of a candidate without undergoing review. The number of withdrawals exceeded the confirmation threshold. Nolan's silver leaf insignia dimmed in the moonlight. Mara announced that his succession eligibility was suspended. Tessa reminded her, the consequence of invoking the anti-coercion clause is disqualification from vetting, not suspension. The council needs to vote. The member's guardian oath has fallen below the candidate threshold. Mara looked at the other elders. This time, no one interpreted the vague wording into a definitive outcome for her. Nolan was officially removed from the list of succession candidates, and his authority to deploy guards was suspended immediately. A subsequent review will determine the duration of his exclusion from the core guard system, as well as the public service duties he must perform along the border. He stood where he was, as if he still didn't understand why a single love could strip him of his power. In truth, it wasn't love that took it away. It was that he had never regarded others' choices as boundaries of his power. My transfer review was scheduled last. Mara asked, after losing your partner's sponsorship, are you still requesting to join Grey Ridge? Yes, as an independent member. Is the Grey Ridge Boundary Council willing to assume the responsibility of accepting you? Gideon stepped forward on behalf of the Grey Ridge Members' Council. Within 14 days, Leah participated in a refuge evacuation, stabilized a member who had lost control, and correctly signaled the assembly fire during the North Slope attack. 27 settled members have signed the acceptance form. He handed the document to the recording desk. Grey Ridge accepts her, not on the condition that she be Ron's partner. What about housing? Mara asked. There is a vacant ranger's cabin on the west side, registered in her name. She may also choose another location herself. Moon Spring. All full members have equal access. Security responsibilities? Handled by the border guard, just like for other members. Every question had a specific answer. I don't need to marry anyone to survive. As Moon Spring Stone recorded my oath of independence, no other scent mingled with mine, only the scents of holly, damp earth, and greenhouse glass warmed by the sun, gradually settling. I am a member of Grey Ridge. Not Ron's subordinate. Not someone Nolan rejected. After the hearing, I found Ron outside the Moon Oath Hall. He was sitting on the stone steps, his bandages already soaked through with blood. Gideon was tending to his wounds, but he stubbornly remained conscious. As I approached, he looked up. Without a bond, I could no longer sense his subtle emotions. It felt very strange to me. Congratulations, he said. Thank you. The roof of the forest lodge needs repair. Gideon will find someone. I can choose the person myself. Right. He made the changes quickly. I looked at his pale face. Those letters, what did they say? It doesn't matter. I'll be the judge of that. Ron was silent for a moment. Some were just asking how you were doing. Some were reminders to himself not to return to Silver Valley. One mentioned that Nolan had become a candidate. Only after I finished writing did I realize that not a single sentence was something I had the right to send you. Why do you love me? When you were 16, at the Moon Spring gathering, you spoke up for a recorder who'd been intimidated by the chief. Everyone thought you were doing it to impress Nolan. That person was Tessa. I know. You later gave all the credit to Nolan because, at the time, you believed he would become a qualified leader. I remember. That day, Ron stood off in the distance, not talking to anyone. I'm not even sure he saw me. Was that the only time? No. Go on. His voice dropped. You set up low workbenches in the greenhouse for members who couldn't fully transform after your mother died. You refused the council's additional rations because the condition was that the Nolan family would act as trustees for your coming-of-age registration. Whenever you're afraid, you always check the exits first, yet you still stand at the front when others are even more afraid. This still sounds like an investigation. Partly it is. He made no attempt to sugarcoat it. I had the guards gather information related to your safety, and I kept details beyond what was strictly necessary. I told myself I was fulfilling Aaron's request. But in truth, some of it was just because I wanted to know. That's not right. I know. You should have told me sooner. Yes. And you shouldn't have used keeping my mother's secret as an excuse. There are legitimate channels for accessing the files. You could have told me how to do it. Yes. He didn't say, but I was doing it to protect you. Nor did he ask me to understand by invoking 7 years of love. I crouched down so my eyes were level with his. I can't forgive you right now. Ron's knuckles twitched. All right. And I won't go back just because you've dissolved the contract. All right. But I'll take back the Moonwolf charm and those letters. They were yours to begin with. You wrote the letters. You don't have to read them. I can read them and then burn them. A faint, almost imperceptible curve finally appeared at the corner of his mouth. That's your choice. I stood up. After taking a few steps, I turned back. Ron. Don't die while I'm deciding whether to forgive you. That would feel like another form of manipulation. He looked at me, and for the first time, there was undisguised hope in his eyes. I'll try my best. Not, try your best. Okay, he said, I won't. It took me 23 days to repair the ranger's cabin. The roof was replaced by a gray-ridged carpenter of my choosing, and the door lock was registered in my name. I built a small greenhouse outside the window and planted moon moss, which helped stabilize the transformations of young werewolves. Ron never set foot inside my house. Every few days, he'd send me a map of the patrol routes, since official members have the right to know the safe paths. The map was left outside the door, and the accompanying message was addressed only to me. He no longer filtered it for me. I read through those letters. The first one was only 3 lines long. He told me the Moonwolf charm was in his possession, and if I wanted it, I could go to Grey Ridge to retrieve it. He didn't send it after writing it, because that was right after I had publicly admitted that Nolan might be my destined mate. The 4th letter was written during the first winter after Ron was exiled. He said Grey Ridge was cold and Moon Spring was small, but the people there wouldn't push someone to the bottom of the reserve list just because a member couldn't shift consistently. The last letter was undated. It reads, if he rejects you, I hope you won't have to come to me. I hope you find an easier path. But if all paths are blocked, I'll leave a door open. The letter isn't signed. Nor does it contain a single sentence asking me to walk through that door. I put them back in the wooden box without burning them. Follow-up news from Silver Valley trickled in sporadically. Nolan was stripped of his inheritance rights, removed from the core guard system, and spent the following winter performing community service on the northern side of Grey Ridge. When he first arrived at the outpost and saw me, he merely stopped from a distance and did not approach any further. Selena dissolved her unfinished political partnership agreement and returned to her original wolf pack. The Valley Alliance was not completely dissolved. Instead, negotiations were conducted jointly by the three wolf packs, no longer tied to a single partnership. Mara retained her seat in the council but lost her position as chairperson following a vote by the members. The new procedure requires that, in the event of a public rejection, the registrar must simultaneously explain to the rejected party the three options: independent status, self-selected partnership, and neutral departure. Tessa became the registrar responsible for implementing the new procedure. When she came to see me at Grey Ridge, we worked in the greenhouse all afternoon. She didn't apologize repeatedly, she simply showed me each new form and asked which parts might be unclear to someone in a state of trauma. I pointed out 7 places. At dusk, she asked, "Are we still friends?" "Under review." She smiled, but a tear fell into the potting soil. I handed her a cloth, but didn't speak the verdict for her. Before the first heavy snowfall of winter, Grey Ridge held a members' meeting. Ron, as head of the border division, reported on the outpost supplies. He stood at the front of the council chamber, still wearing that old black coat. The wound in his side made him turn a little more slowly. After the meeting, the others left one by one. I placed a document in front of him. A complete application for self-selected companionship. Ron looked at it for a long time but didn't reach for it. "You've only been confirmed as an independent for a month. 37 days. You don't need this." "I know. The trauma rejection is over." "I know. Nolan has also lost his eligibility. You don't need to use me to deal with him." "Ron." He fell silent. "I have my own housing, Moon Spring eligibility, and membership oath." I listed off to him. "I can leave Grey Ridge tomorrow without losing any partner guarantees. I can also choose never to forgive you. My rights on paper remain unaffected." "Yes. I've read all the letters." His Adam's apple bobbed. "And?" "2 of them were poorly written. I can rewrite them. The rest are acceptable." I pushed the application forward a little. "I'm not choosing you because Mother entrusted you to me, nor because you've waited 7 years. Waiting doesn't automatically grant eligibility, neither does renouncing your inheritance." "Then why?" "Because I saw what you took on after you made a mistake. You didn't use love to demand I stay, nor did you turn letting go into a new debt. You let go of everything that could control me." I paused. "And also because I love you." Ron's hand finally rested on the edge of the document, but he still hadn't signed. "Are you sure?" "I'm clear-headed. No pain, no housing pressure, and no orders from the leader. A full mark cannot be granted based on written consent alone." "I know. You can sign the full contract without accepting the mark on the side of your neck." "I know. You can always. If you ask again, I'll withdraw my application." He immediately picked up the pen. "Sign it now." "Ron." "What?" "I haven't given you permission to decide when I'll sign." He put down his pen, looking, surprisingly, a little flustered. I smiled. He smiled too. It wasn't the cold detachment of that dangerous exile in the back of the Moon Oath Hall, nor the sharpness of the border leader facing an attack. It was simply a man who had waited too long and couldn't believe the door had actually opened. "Going to Moon Spring tonight?" he asked. "Is that a question?" "Yes. I agree." The full vows were still exchanged at Grey Ridge Moon Spring. This time there were more witnesses, yet no one answered for us. We confirmed, clause by clause, the boundaries regarding property, residence, withdrawal, and the mate bond. My forest cottage was still registered in my name, and the Frost Lake cabin still belonged to Ron. The mate bond did not alter either party's voting rights as a member. Before the final step, he stood before me. "Leah Winter, do you grant me permission to establish a full partner imprint?" "I grant it." "On the side of the neck?" "Yes." "Now." I grabbed his coat and pulled him closer. "Now." As the bite mark formed, the pain lasted only an instant. What surged through me afterward was neither the fated pull Nolan had left behind, nor the survival instinct born of the trauma of rejection. It was Ron. His long-held restraint, his fear of losing me, and his disbelief at being chosen again all became clear through the complete bond. I also let him feel my nervousness, my still lingering wariness, and a love even stronger than that wariness. He released me, and his first words were still, "Do you regret it?" "A little." Ron's body stiffened. "I regret not making you wait 2 more days." He leaned down and kissed me. Outside Moon Spring, Gideon let out a loud sigh. "I knew I shouldn't have come tonight." I laughed softly against Ron's lips. For the first annual partner confirmation ceremony since the new program was implemented, I returned to the Moon Oath Hall as a registered member of Grey Ridge. Not to support Ron in his inheritance dispute, nor to show Nolan the outcome. Tessa invited me to serve as a witness for the independent status program. A young woman stood before the Moon Spring stone, her face pale after being rejected by her destined partner. People in the hall were still whispering, the tradition hadn't vanished in a single winter. Tessa didn't pressure her to choose a new partner. She laid 3 documents flat in front of the woman. You can apply for independent observation, seek a partner of your own choosing, or be escorted by guards to a neutral zone, she said. You don't have to decide on a full relationship today. Whichever option you choose, your housing and access to the moon spring will not be revoked for 7 days. The woman looked up at me. I didn't tell her which path was best. Choose the one whose consequences you're willing to bear, I said. If you don't know yet, just pick the place that will let you think safely for now. When the ceremony ended, Ron was waiting for me outside the Moon Oath Hall. He didn't come in. I walked over to him. Why didn't you come in? This is your job. It could also be our journey. Next time? Next time. After returning to Grey Ridge, I didn't move into the Frost Lake cabin. Ron didn't ask me to either. We took turns staying at each other's houses. He would still knock on the door of the ranger station, even though the binding contract made it clear to him that I was inside, and even though he already had the key I'd given him in his pocket. That night, snow weighed down the holly outside the window. I was in the greenhouse recording the growth of a new batch of moon moss when there were 3 knocks at the door. Leia, Ron said, can I come in? The door isn't locked. That's not an answer. I put down my pen, walked over, and opened the door. His shoulders were covered in snow, and he was holding the repaired wooden moonwolf. The missing tail horn was still there, with only a very thin strip of silver inlaid into the crack. Who told you to fix it? I asked. Ron immediately pulled his hand back. If you don't like it, I can put it back the way it was. I grabbed his wrist. I felt the familiar tension from the complete contract. I didn't say I didn't like it. Then can I come in? I pulled the door open wider. This is my own house, I said. I know. My moonspring eligibility is my own. I know. Even if one day I don't choose you, these things will still be mine. Ron looked at me. They always will be. I pulled him inside and stood on tiptoe to kiss the snow off his lips. Then I'm choosing you today. The door closed behind us. There was no faded silver bell, no council records, and no one to witness it for me. I simply took his hand. And he waited for me to clasp it first.